My name's Todd Isaacson, and I've been selling to big box retailers, large retailers for 14 years. I recently retired, and I would like to share some of my insights on how to work with these retailers with you. Um, I recall about 5, 6 years ago, some folks came into our office very frustrated about trying to sell to major retailers and not really knowing where to start to try to make the sales. And I would like to be there for you and guide you and help you to do this because it's really not that difficult of a process once you know how. You can be off to selling and also making a very good living selling to major retailers products of all kinds. So what I wanted to start out with is you first make the first phone call. This would be the first step to making contact with a retailer. So before you make the call, you want to obviously plan the call ahead of time and understand the goal of the call. Your goal is to get your product in front of the buyer. It is not to close the sales on the phone or to close the sales in a week or a month, because that's really not how things are done with products and selling products to major retailers. So it's a process and it takes time. And the more you understand about the process, the more you're able to work with it. And as I say, anybody can do it and you can make a good living doing it. So let me kind of get started and go into a little bit more detail. So in calling you're going to go ahead and call the switchboard operator of major retailers. Some major retailers are very open to phone calls and new products and so forth. And some are not so open. They'll tell you to go online and submit a product there, and then there might be, or email a product information to a certain email address, and you don't really have a chance to talk to anybody. But some companies, you get right through to the buyer, so you better be ready. Some companies, such as Costco, you better be ready and prepared with your information if you're going to go ahead and try to sell the product to them. So one soft approach, one easy approach is just to try to find out when they're going to be reviewing the product category. So you're going to have situations where you have buyers that might be responsible for 3 or 4 different product categories. For example, they might be responsible for lights, for tool storage, for electrical items, for tools. And through different times of the year, once a year, once every 2 years, they're going to review that product category. So you want to be able to participate in that review. And so the approach would be just to try to find out, to make the phone call, try to reach the buyer, and try to find out when it is that they're going to be reviewing the product. You need to know when samples need to arrive at the retailer. You need to know if the buyer is going to be interested in the product that you want to try to propose, and you need to try to get feedback if the buyer is not interested, because it costs a lot of money to ship these samples and to make them. And your company's not going to be very happy if the buyer really wasn't interested, really didn't go over the product. So you're going to have kind of a first step to this for the review, and you try to get the email address of the buyer and try to send photos of what you'd like to propose along with product specs and more information, as much information as possible on the product via email, or whatever is an accepted method of communication to the buyer, so they can make a determination. Yes, I have interest in the product, or no, I don't. And then yes, you can submit it for a review. Or maybe they'll come back to you and they'll say, I'm looking for A, B, C, D in this review. If you'd like to participate in the review, you can propose items that, for example, it's going to be maybe a tool chest, for example, and one's going to have 4 drawers, one's going to have 6 drawers, one's going to have 10 drawers, one's going to have 12 drawers. One's going to be 26 inches wide, one's going to be 42 inches wide. So they can provide you more information on that review if you are able to speak with them about it. You can also call to introduce a new product. Just introduce a new product to a buyer. Especially again, some retailers are very interested in new products. You want to try to explain what the value proposition is. Very important that you understand and are fully familiar with your product. For example, like if you're making a gas grill, what is the stainless steel? Is it 304 stainless steel? Is it 430 stainless steel? How thick is the steel? This is going to be information that the buyers of the categories are going to be very familiar with the specifications. They're going to be able to understand whether you're providing a good value proposition or you're not. And so you're going to have to, but you definitely want to understand your product before you try to propose it, and find where it fits as far as your competitors go, whether you're competitive or you're not competitive. When you have the buyer on the phone, it's helpful if it can be exclusive. If the item you might be able to make it exclusive to the buyer or to that retailer. But you have to be careful about making items exclusive. You sometimes can't just change a paint finish or some other small component of a product and say, oh, well, it's exclusive, it's unique to you. And another retailer has the same item, only it's just a small little tweak to it. You want to, be open with the retailer you're working with and try to determine what kind of exclusivity you can offer. If your item's patented and so forth, if you have, for example, you have a gas grill with a superior cooking system, what makes it unique? What makes it, are there patents involved? Let's see. You want to know ahead of time how your pricing compares to other competitors in the market. You want to know before you make that phone call. Because if you're not, especially, you need to understand that particular retailer, what they're selling online, what they're selling in store, and be fully aware of it and fully aware of what the value proposition of those items are, but also the competitors and what's the value proposition of those items compared to your item and the value proposition that you present. So you'll want to understand this pricing, and it gets kind of complicated when it comes to, like, for example, understanding where your drop shipment pricing falls. Because you can be using a third-party warehouse to store your product, and they can be quite expensive because you have to pay for unloading, storing, loading of the product, labeling of the product, all of these factors that come into anything that's involved with storing or shipping your product and palletizing your product and so forth. And you need to understand that cost, and you need to understand the domestic cost, shipping cost to send the product out to the customer or the member. So, and this gets even a little bit more complicated in that I will suggest that you use the retailer's shipping company because they're going to get a better rate than you're going to receive. And they might pay $200, $250 to send a 150-pound item all the way across country. But you need to kind of have a feel for this, because what most online retailers you're going to find is the shipping price is included in the price. So to understand whether your price is competitive, you kind of need to roll that shipping price. You need to have your FOB price, so the price you pay at the port, and the price that the factory would charge at the port, and then you're going to have the shipping cost to get the product over to your warehouse, And then you're going to have the storage costs at your warehouse, and you're going to have the domestic cost to ship to the customer. All of these are going to come into play if it's going to be a drop shipment or an online type of offering. You might call just to introduce your factory or company to the retailer that you're calling. If you've got a 1,000,000 square foot factory and you can supply that retailer that has maybe 700 stores or 1,000 stores with 3 or 4 items per store, this is important for the buyer to know that you even have the capability to supply them. And what is your open capacity at that factory is very important as well. You want to make sure too that you thoroughly understand your ability to change product if that buyer will come back and want changes, which on a lot of occasions they will. So you'll want to understand what is your research and design capabilities, your R&D capabilities to make changes. Because if the buyer says, hey, I don't like this aspect of the product, or I want to have this part of the product, how effectively and quickly can your factory or your R&D department implement those changes? Is it going to take a couple of months? Is it going to take a year? Because the time is can be an issue. You want to keep that buyer engaged and interested in remembering your product. There, you have to understand, major retailers are constantly contacted with new products or innovative products, or contacted by companies that don't have their product line in with them and they want them in with them. So they're constantly being contacted. You just want your chance to show your product and the value proposition that your product has. And you want to communicate to that buyer that you're capable of making it, and you're capable of making changes to it if needed, and you're capable of supplying it on time. Either you have a large enough factory or enough capacity in that factory to supply it on time. When you call, it's very important, very critical. You have to be nice. You have to be kind. You have to keep in your mind that whether you're talking to the switchboard operator or a buyer or other buyers of other categories, everybody can help you. And if you're kind and you're patient and you're nice and you don't, push, then people will, I have found people will go out of their way to try to give you a hand, to get you in touch with the correct buyer if you've been put in contact with the incorrect buyer, or the switchboard operator will try to help you and maybe even give you an email address to reach the buyer. They have ways to help if you're just considerate and appreciative of their time. That's, I think, the most important aspect of trying to sell to major retailers, is just kind of see things through their eyes and understand that their time that they're constantly being inundated with approaches. And if you're considerate about that, then you're going to do pretty well in your contact with them. When you're talking to the buyer, allow time for the buyer to also speak, because you're going to be nervous, you're going to be excited in being able to actually speak with the buyer, but the buyer can provide a wealth of information that's going to help you, in that you may not have a product that they're interested in at that time, but they already have a product in mind, or their team already has a product in mind, or upper management already has a product in mind. And by listening to them, you can understand what is the retail price point they want for an item, what are they looking for design and colors, and what type of innovation they're looking for with the item. If you let them speak and you allow them time to speak, they'll let you know what it is that they're looking for, and also what potential roadblocks you might have in working with them in regards to what you've already mentioned to them. So different retailers are going to want a different type of product. Some retailers, their customer base doesn't mean it's a bad product. It just means their customer base is different than another group, another retailer. Their customer base is different. So it's not necessarily that they want a cheap item. It's that they might want a good value proposition item, but some products, some $1,000 item might not be effective over selling at a certain retailer where they might work at another retailer. It just depends on the retailer. We talked a little bit about drop shipment already, and drop shipment is going to be probably the preferred if you have a new item that's untested, the brand is not out in the field. They're going to want to probably do drop shipment of the item, and that's where that's the least risky method of taking your item in for the retailer. Some retailers will have different methods. They'll do test store order, or they'll do roadshow, or they'll do, as I say, drop shipment. The drop shipment is probably the least risky. There's still work involved with getting an item online. You have to do very first class photos. You have to do first class video, professional video. So there's a lot of work on your side. There's work on their side to get an item online, but it's still the least risk for the buyer, in that they don't have to buy 10 containers or 12 containers. And it's also less risk for you, because there won't be a discussion later that, hey, we tried this item, it didn't sell, now what are we going to do? So it's less risk for you too to introduce an item drop shipment to as well. You can, if you're trying to get into a major retailer, there are other drop shipment retailers you can try to work with, such as Wayfair, Overstock, Amazon. They're going to have requirements too, and it may be difficult to get the item in with them too. They're going to run a comp analysis as well, but it might be easier to get a product with them and show a sales record than it is to get a product, say, with a Costco. So you might try to start there, get a sales record, then go to a major retailer you're trying to get into, say, look, this item really sells well over here. But keep in mind that they're going to want to have a major retailer is going to want to have a better value proposition or a better price offer than where it is elsewhere. And they're going to check it. They're going to check the pricing and the comps elsewhere. So you need to keep that in mind. Everybody needs to make a profit to walk away, happy in the contract. The retailer needs to make a profit. You need to make a profit. Your company needs to make a profit. So you need to be careful that this will be the expectation with the major retailer. The buyer will, no matter how much you want when you call the buyer, the buyer will not make a decision at that time. That's not how this is done. If a new item is approved by a buyer, assistant buyer, then it's kicked up to upper management, and it might be put out to quality control to also say whether they sign off on the item or not. So you need to keep in mind that the process, you're going to go through an assistant buyer, an assistant to the assistant buyer, a buyer, and then a general manager and assistant general manager and a vice president. And all these folks need to approve. And I suggest you do get all of them to approve. I've taken the word of a buyer before saying that they want an item. They're very keen on an item, a buyer, an assistant buyer. And then when they've submitted the item into upper management for certain reasons, upper management said, no, we don't like the risk of the item. We don't think it'll sell, or there's other risks involved with it. We're not going to sign off on it. But then you're stuck. If you've already started production and so forth, you're stuck with that matter because the buyer doesn't have final decision to bring a product in. Also, quality control can be an issue if the buyer doesn't involve quality control with the process. So you want to make sure quality control is involved, and everybody is signed off, everybody's approved, everybody agrees that the item is fit for sale, and you can go ahead and sell through their channel. You don't want to just assume just because you've been told by a buyer or system buyer that yes, we're going to go ahead and accept the item. You want to have a signed contract, and you want to again have quality control involved. You're going to be probably very happy to have the item moving forward with a buyer and a system buyer, and not want to rock the boat, so to speak, and involve other folks or ask if everybody signed off or ask to get the contracts signed off. But in the long run, you're going to be much better off. Your company is going to be much happier if you're just sure everybody is agreed and has signed off on the item. You're responsible to understand the certification requirements, the safety requirements. So like if you're trying to sell a gas grill, is it CSA approved? All of these things, it's expected that you meet the certification requirements of an item. And if you're selling in a particular state that has, like California, that has certain requirements like Prop 65 requirements, you're expected to meet those requirements as well. Packaging requirements are also very important. You're expected to meet the ISTA requirements. And the worst thing you can do is start selling an item, and then you start having shipping damage all over the place. And you're going to have different shipping requirements for small parcel than you're going to have for regular larger items. So you need to make sure you get the proper testing that's going to apply to the item. And when you're doing drop shipment, not necessarily is the retailer going to tell you that they want this done. It's gonna have to be on your own initiative that you're gonna understand that this is just part of the process and this needs to be done. If you're doing more of a direct import type basis, these tests might come into play a little bit more readily from the retailer you're working with. But if you're doing drop shipment, it's pretty much understood that you're required to go ahead and make sure those tests are up to date, and that they've been performed for the packaging, the ISTA testing, the appropriate test for depending on the size of the item. Before contacting the buyer, you're going to want to understand, this is really critical, what are the payment terms of the retailer you're working with. I've had a very large deal go away worth a lot of money because the payment terms was not acceptable to my company. But you need to know ahead of time what are the payments, rather than go down the road and go through all the work and get samples and all this. You know ahead of time, hey, this company, they'll do a 2% discount if they pay within 15 days, or whatever it is, the payment terms that they're aiming to do, that can be negotiable to some extent too. That you want to get that out there ahead of time before a lot of time and effort is put into to the work. I've already mentioned quality control needs to be involved early. Management has to sign off on all of the aspects of the item. You have to have a totally completed contract before you go ahead and proceed with production. Another method of contacting the buyers is you can try it on LinkedIn as well. But again, kind, considerate, patient. Always, every communication to the buyer, whether it's an email or a phone call or a LinkedIn message, allow 2 weeks for them to come back to you, and don't push sooner than that. They're constantly inundated. They probably come into 500 emails, and they probably leave with 500 emails still to work on at the end of the day. They're really busy. They have multiple categories they're managing, plus they're fielding calls and so forth. So you need to be cognizant of this and be patient. You can message them on LinkedIn. But again, I would not send like photos right then and there. I would just uh, try to just make contact and see if there's an interest. If there's an interest, they'll probably provide you an email address to go ahead and send pictures or further information or quotes. Your main goal is just to get the product in front of the buyer. So this is not rocket science. It's not complicated. They can review the item at your showroom or corporate office or a trade show. You might also, when you're calling them, ask when they're going to attend trade shows, and then try to set an appointment at the trade show so you make sure you're at the booth so you can talk with them and show them the product at the booth. You need to be very cognizant too to make sure that your final version of what you're trying to sell to the major retailer, that the item you have is the final version. They're going to want changes in a lot of cases. If they do want changes, you have to make a new sample with those changes, show send the sample to the buyer with a final version sample to the buyer. Make sure they approve, because when you get into production, you're going to have a third party involved in production sample testing that is going to say that this doesn't match up to the information we have for the product. It's not a match. So you need to be very aware of that. You can reach, if you are not for some reason able to reach to a buyer, you can try to reach to upper management, who will put you in contact with a buyer. But obviously this has kind of risk factors involved, because you're in essence contacting the boss of the buyer to try to get a hold of the buyer. And they're going to wonder why you didn't just contact the buyer directly. So this is, again, tread lightly if you're going to try this approach with trying to reach to the buyer if you're not able to get them in the if you're not able to get a hold of them when you try to call. So that's a little bit of a short synopsis. If you find that the content of this information is helpful to try to sell to major retailers, I'd really appreciate it if you could give me a like. And then if you could subscribe also to the channel, that would be really helpful to get this message out, because this really shouldn't be a mystery on how to do this. This is really not that complicated. It's pretty straightforward. And I think it's really also helpful to the retailers out there if folks know how to actually introduce a product to a buyer. And I'll be coming out with other videos on sales and how to approach buyers, what type of methods to use with the sales techniques and sales information and other information about products and other ways to try to get products in to be reviewed by retailers. So again, if you like this video, I appreciate it if you go ahead and smash the like button and subscribe. And I also can be reached for sales consultation if you're an individual and you'd like to know more about how to sell. I'm happy to work with you. If you are a company that would like to try to get a product into a major retailer, I'm also very happy to work with you as well. Thank you for your time. Again, this is Todd Isaacson, and I appreciate your time. Take care.